Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So if you've seen on my channel that I've been posting kind of shorts every so often for the last few weeks, and in those shorts I usually like to include some of the Genshin or the Honkai Star Rail emote stickers that they have usually updated quite often. But today I wanted to tackle drawing my own versions of like my persona or my VTuber model just for future shorts if I want to draw any original characters or I want to focus on just using anything more related to my channel rather than just something Genshin or Honkai Star Rail based. So that is what we are going to be doing today. So I showed you guys me adjusting the canvas size to about 4 by 4 inches in width and height so we can get started with a canvas that's a little bit more suited to the size that I want to work with for today's kind of stickery emotes. So before we get started with the, talking about the drawing portion for today's video, I'm going to let you guys know that next week or maybe the week after that, I would like to do another Drawing Your OCs video again. So I'm going to be doing my selection from the Instagram hashtag. So I'll leave that on screen for you guys to take a look so you can use that to post your OCs. You can use pre-existing work, just add the hashtag to some part of your description of your Instagram post, or any new posts are also very much welcomed. Just please do not directly tag me. I won't be looking in my directly tagged, and I'm not going to look in my DMs just because a lot of my DMs get hidden because of different ways people have decided to speak or talk with their first message. Sometimes Instagram filters them in a certain way, so I won't be able to see them. So I'm just going to be looking directly into the hashtag, and I'm going to be picking from old and new submissions. So definitely feel free to use old submissions from before or like old posts, because I won't be filtering them from like new to oldest. I'm just gonna be randomly picking from the entire selection. So yeah, if you guys would like to join that, feel free to use the hashtag, and I'll be selecting that probably sometime next week. So you can probably expect the video to be either next week or the week after that. So if you do participate, thank you once again for submitting your OCs. It's always wonderful and fun to draw new OCs that are a little bit more out of my comfort zone or something I'm not usually drawn to drawing as often, just because I do particularly get drawn to certain characters at times. So it does give me a lot of variety to kind of push my boundaries a little bit more. So on to the actual drawing portion for today's video. I am drawing my VTuber model, so I'll put my VTuber model on screen right here so you have something to reference. So basically it's kind of like roughly based on me, and kind of like my previous persona back when I was in kind of middle school, high school. So I kind of merged the two together, added a little bit of a different aesthetic to it because I do like plants and kind of more of like clovers, flowers and stuff that's kind of associated with myself and my channel. So that's what the kind of aesthetic of my character is right now. So the sketch kind of went by really quickly while I was talking, but we are on to the inking phase. Now I'm going to be kind of playing around with a few different brushes or trying to adjust settings for the brushes so that I can find something that I would like to consistently use whenever I happen to make more of these kind of like sticker emotes in the future, if I need something to be more fitting for, you know, certain expressions and stuff. So I was trying my best to find something that was quite smooth, but also very easy for me to use for line work, because usually, I think you guys are familiar with me saying this, I don't really like doing line art too much, but I always see the benefit of it for certain aspects, for certain, you know, it makes some things a little bit easier, like consistency, making things a little bit more bold and punchy in terms of keeping things like within the lines, or you can adjust the lines to be a little bit more thicker or thinner, and I don't really have to worry about painting over things. So for the brush, I believe there is a brush called Fill Outline in the ink section of the Procreate brushes that is already automatically downloaded for you, and it's kind of like one of the pre-set brushes that it already has installed, if that makes sense. And I adjusted the settings to be a little bit different in terms of just the stabilization. So I have it set to, I think, 50 or 60% on the settings so that it has a little bit more of that slower action, and the kind of the line or the brush kind of follows behind my stylus a little bit slower so that I can kind of more easily predict where I want lines to start and stop, and it prevents a lot of my lines from being too shaky. Now, I didn't set up the stabilizer to be super high because I don't want to be working super... I don't know how to explain it. My favorite stabilizer forever will be the one that is in Paint Tool SAI. I think that one's just the most comfortable to use and the most easiest to control. It doesn't really alter your lines too much, and I think the speed of it is just much easier to work with. But enough about the line work. I am going to be moving on to color. But actually, let me backtrack a little bit. So I'm kind of selecting the entire outside of my chibi character, and then I'm going to be using a thicker brush, which is still the same outline brush, but just a larger size. So in Procreate, on the side, you can actually set kind of like presets for each different size that you want by kind of holding or sliding the little brush setting, and there will be a plus sign. So when you have the plus sign open, you can add that brush to have that specific size at that preset. So I have 3. So I have one for a normal size for just general use for the eyes, and then I have a thinner one for the rest of the chibi, and then I have a much thicker one to do a thicker outline just so the chibi stands out and I don't have to do a white border for it to stand out against any kind of background. So that is what I did. So after that, I merged the outline with my line work, and I have basically 3 different layers, and then later on I will have 2 different layers. So I have the eyes on a completely different layer, I also have the eyebrows on a different layer, and then I have the hair, clothing, and skin, everything else on one different layer. So I have 3 layers for the line work itself. But for color, I set my general line work or line art layer to reference so that whenever I am kind of filling with the color tool or whatever you want to call it, I can just make a new layer, and when you drag and drop your color, it will always reference whatever is your reference layer. So it's just easier for me to work a little bit more quicker rather than going back, selecting, going back to my color layer, bucketing, then unselecting, go back to my line art layer, select, and then, rinse and repeat basically. So I basically did all the base colors first, and I've separated each individual part by skin is on its own layer, hair is on its own layer, and the rest of the clothing and accessories are on their own layer as well. Now I've kept everything basically separated very simply just because I like to keep minimal layer management when I'm working on my iPad. But I kept all the clothes on one layer because I'm basically only going to be adding a multiply layer to do the shadows. And then for the hair, for the gradient, I alpha locked the black hair, and then I took a softer brush, added in the blue, I made a new layer, clipped it, added the skin tone in a weird blob shape, and then I used the Gaussian blur to make it much more softer, and then I'll merge that later. After that, I'll make a new layer and do the highlights, then merge it, make a new layer and do the shadows with a multiply layer so that I can color in the hair, which is like the black portion, and also the blue portion at the same time, and I don't have to fuss with changing the shade color to match a little bit closer. I did something similar for the clothing where I used the multiply layer, but then for the skin, I just chose kind of more of a darker peachy pink tone to do the shadows and the color of the mouth. And then we are working on the eyes, which I did kind of like my simple eyes, which is just a half circle on the bottom portion of the eye, and then kind of a squat little oval in the center to kind of act as a little highlight for the eye, but also just gives it a little bit more life to it so it doesn't look too dead inside. After that, I'm going to rearrange my layers as well, just to make sure that things are going to be correct when I merge them. But I'm trying my best to make sure that the chibi kind of appears a little bit more brighter and a little bit rounder, but I'm wanting to keep the shading and everything quite simple because on a smaller screen or at a smaller size, I want things to read quite clearly. I know that there's some parts of my VTuber model's design that I might have missed out, and the reason being is that I feel like it would be a little bit too cluttered, so I didn't include that in. Before we merge everything, or merge more of my layers, I alpha locked my line art layers so that I could color them individually, and I could make the skin portion and some other portions like the inside of the leaves to be a little bit lighter so that the face appears a little bit softer, because I didn't want to have black line art for everything. But here is the time lapse for the chibi. So like I mentioned, I'm keeping everything to be a little bit more of like headshot bust up, just because the emotes or the stickers, I don't really need the full body at a certain scale. So for the most part, we're just going to leave it as this and focus mostly on the face, because I want to do more expressions rather than movement of the body for the entire chibi. So yeah, after that, now that we have basically this full version, we ran through the time lapse, I am going to make a new palette in my Procreate. I have a bunch of old palettes that I'm going to delete later, but basically I'm going to be color picking and plopping in the color swatches into the new palette, so that when I work on future emotes, which I'll do 2 more for this video, and I'll show you all the ones that I did up until, I think I only did 6 total for now, and then I'll add more later and maybe make some of my OCs, which maybe I'll do for a future stream or something else. So basically, once I've color picked all my colors, you can go back into your color wheel, which I like to use classic, and if you clicked on your palette, it will appear at the bottom. So to make things also easier for myself, I am going to be opening up the reference tool or reference window and have my previous chibi open, just because I want to make sure that I have the details kind of consistently placed. And later on, I forget to do this at the very beginning, but I want to also just duplicate the folder, merge it or flatten it, so that I have a plain version of my chibi just facing forward, waving, and I'm going to use that kind of as the base so that things are around the same size for the most part. I don't want to make like my head extremely small and my body too big if it doesn't make sense in context, so I'm trying to make sure that things are about the same size for the most part. So the next one that I'm working on, I kind of wanted one that's a little bit more suffering, if anything. So the first one is just like a very simple one, me kind of like waving hi as kind of like the intro one. This one's depicting more of my struggles or me suffering. There's going to be a few other ones that I'm going to add at the very end, but there's definitely plenty of different kind of emotes that I would like to make of different expressions. And I've been kind of like sifting through and looking at different people's like expression sheets so that I can kind of pick and choose which ones that I think are going to be the most applicable to my YouTube shorts. So that's kind of like another thing I forgot to mention earlier about the YouTube shorts. I believe in a previous video or live stream I mentioned that I had no plans of making any YouTube shorts for quite a while because they didn't really appeal to me. But more recently, because I've been wanting to draw more without filming, I thought it'd be a fun way to kind of show the process or the progress of a piece without having me to record while I'm drawing. And I know previously I would post like time lapses to kind of like supplement some of the artwork that I really liked, but I never recorded the process of me drawing physically on my iPad via my webcam. So I'm gonna do kind of a little bit of both every so often. So yeah, I think shorts are mostly going to be that. I might do some that are more playing around with my OCs for the shorts. I have a few in mind that I think that could be fun, but it might take a little bit more longer for setup. But I think it could be fun to do because I want to draw my OCs a lot more in general. So I'm going to see if I can set that up for a future short, maybe early next month or something like that. We'll see. I'm not going to dedicate too much time doing shorts. It's just something for fun. I don't see it as like a thing that I want to do too regularly. It's just whenever I do have footage of, or not footage, I guess like if I have a drawing that I really like that I didn't do for a video, I would like to showcase it in more ways than one, if that makes sense. And it's just nice to show that on different other platforms like Instagram, if anything. So yeah, back to the chibi. So I'm basically following the same process for everything. So I did do my sketch. I lowered the sketch's opacity. We do the line work and I do it in 3 different layers. And the reason why I put the eyebrows on a separate layer in the beginning is that I want to have an easier time coloring the line work of where my bangs are to my face to be brown. And it's just much easier if I don't have to include the eyebrows into that. But later on, when I'm doing more like layer management and we're going to draw more emotes on this particular canvas, I'm going to be merging a lot of my layers together so that I don't have a overabundance of unused kind of like not necessary layers, because I'm not going to go back to adjust them too much. So just for layer management, I do like keeping things to a minimum if I can on the iPad, just because storage space, but also it's kind of annoying scrolling up and down to look for my layers. I know there's an easier way to find the layer that you're on. I don't remember the shortcut, but if you hold Control, I believe, or Control and Shift, I don't remember if it's Control and Shift or just Control in Painter's Sai and in Clip Studio Paint, it can directly show you which layer it is. And if you click on the area, let's say you have a straight little dot, and you click on the dot while holding down Control or Shift, it will take you to that layer and then you can immediately erase it. So for me, it's much easier if anything. But for like shadows and everything for these little chibis, like I said, I wanted to keep everything simple. So I'm using basically the same shadow color for the inside of my chibi's eye, like the sclera part. So it's like the white part of the eye. I'm using that for the clothing and I'm using that for the hair so that it makes it much easier for me to not need to save as many colors. And you'll see that while I'm coloring, I will always pop out my color palette just because it's a lot easier for me to keep it open and kind of just like drag and drop the colors. And then after that, I'll put away the color palette so that I can kind of like adjust things as needed. But I know for some people, like me, I do love working at this size of a iPad just because it fits perfectly into one of the purses or like bags that I own, and it fits really nicely, and it's also just like of a smaller size. But I know some people don't really care having like multiple windows open because maybe you have the iPad 12 Pro or whatever is the largest one that has a little bit more screen real estate. But for me, I do like keeping things usually to a minimum. So me having the reference window and the palette for me feels a little bit cluttered. So when I can and when I don't need to, I will put away the color palette. So I will only open it when I'm dragging and dropping colors. And I try to do that all at once if I can so that I can minimize the amount of time I need to have it open rather than, fiddling with the minimal amount of space. So for the last chibi that I'm going to be showing you guys today for the little sticker emotes, but like I said, I'm going to be showing you all 6 at the very end, and definitely by the time this video comes up, I will be drawing a lot more and some of my OCs and stuff so that it's a little bit more applicable to the shorts. But this particular chibi is a little bit more of like a confused or kind of more concerned. I guess it's more confused because I'll end up putting question marks and everything. And I don't know if I like this one in particular. I don't know if I like how I did the eyes when I colored it. So this might be one of the chibis that I might adjust later on in the future if I'm not too lazy. But you can see me utilizing also the different sizes of the brush that you can use, because like I said, for the middle size for the brush that I was using, I've used that only for the eyes because I wanted something a little bit more easier for me to form the eyes without having to drag and drop color super like quickly, if that makes sense. And then I would use the thinner ones for all these other lines because I want all the inside lines to be a lot thinner and a little bit less like bold, but then I want a general larger outline over everything else just because I want the chibi itself to be able to stand out on its own. Also, I mentioned in a previous video that usually when I drag and drop colors, I really don't like doing that if I'm trying to fill in an area just because it tends to give me a weird hazy fuzzy line between where I initially put the brush of color and then where I drag and drop. And people have been telling me that it is due to my brush, which I had a inkling that it was going to be about my brush because my brush has a little bit of a softer edge when coloring. So I knew it's because of the kind of like difference in opacity, and the softer edge is preventing me from getting like a super clean fill. So me dragging and dropping with the fill outline brush gives me something very smooth. And I know people also use syrup or the studio pen, I believe believe, which also gives a very easy way to fill color without having that weird fuzzy hazy edge between the two colors when they're placed next to each other. So I had no problems dragging and dropping when doing the emote little stickers for myself. But yeah, I think that's basically it in terms of the entire process. It's just back and forth for the most part of doing sketch. You do the line work, we do the outline of the line work, then I will set the reference layer to be my main line work layer, and then we'll go ahead and drag and drop and separate our layers appropriately for the skin on a separate layer, the hair on a separate layer, and then everything else is on a separate layer, which is just the clothing and the accessories or anything that can be colored in with the kind of purpley gray color that I used for the general shading with the multiply tool. And then yeah, I will change the line art color afterwards after I do all the shading, and then that's basically done for the little chibis. Now, not gonna lie, I didn't spend like a tremendous amount of time on these, but I definitely spent more time on them than I was initially planning to, and that's because I definitely work faster on the computer. Like I said, just like in general using shortcuts or just like general doing line work and stuff, for me it's faster on Paint Tool Slide and Clip Studio Paint than it is on the iPad, and I think it's just because of familiarity but also habits. So yeah, I wanted to try my best to draw all the emotes on the iPad on Procreate, so I'm probably going to do that moving forward just so I can get more familiar with it, but also so that I can draw more of them on the go whenever I need to, rather than being tied to my computer and to my desk, and being confined into my room in order to draw these emotes, even though it is faster. But yeah, I definitely find it kind of fun doing them on the iPad like this, and I used to draw like bonbongi versions for stickers and stuff on the iPad as well at some point, and it was always kind of fun being able to doodle something a little bit on a smaller scale that feels like if I don't like it, it's not too detrimental of a time loss, if that makes sense. Because for the most part, all the chibis that I drew for kind of these emote stickers I actually really liked, and I think they actually turned out pretty cute. A lot of my favorite ones are actually the ones at the very end. I think the last 3 are my favorite for the most part, and hopefully I'm going to use them a lot more, but I'm also going to hopefully draw a lot more of them so that I have a plethora. But if you wish to see some of these chibis more in action, or just like seeing what other ones I might make for the future, definitely check out the shorts whenever you can. It definitely helps me, but also you can let me know on feedback of like formats of the shorts and stuff, because I would like to make them shorter if I can, because I sometimes don't want to watch a 50-second short. So we'll see what happens. But for the most part, these are the 3 that I ended up doing today. I'll show the last 3 on the final end screen for you guys to look at as well. And hopefully you guys enjoyed today's little process of me drawing little sticker emotes of my little VTuber persona for future videos and shorts. So I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!